So conscience must be awakened. We must learn to understand truth emotionally in certain cases, and we can do this only by not being afraid to face contradictions in ourselves. We have special appliances in us that prevent us from seeing these contradictions. These appliances are called buffers. Buffers are special arrangements, or a special growth if you like, which prevent us from seeing the truth about ourselves and about other things. Buffers divide us into sort of fault-proof compartments. We may have many contradictory desires, intentions, aims, and we do not see that they are contradictory because buffers stand between them and prevent us from looking from one compartment into another. When you are in one compartment, you think it is the whole thing. Then you pass into another compartment and you think that this is the whole thing. These appliances are called buffers because, as in a railway carriage, they diminish shocks. But in relation to the human machine, they are even more. They make it impossible to see, so they are blinkers as well. People with really strong buffers never see, but if they saw how contradictory they were, they would be unable to move because they would not trust themselves. That is why buffers are necessary in mechanical life. Such extreme cases mean wrong development, but even in ordinary people, in one or another line, there are always deeply hidden buffers. Question. When one recognises a buffer in oneself, can one do anything to get rid of it? Answer. First you must see it. Before you see it, nothing can be done. And whether you can do anything after you have seen it depends on the size of the buffer and on many other things. Sometimes it is necessary to take a hammer and break it, and sometimes it disappears if you throw light on it, for buffers do not like light. When buffers begin to disappear and become less strong, conscience begins to manifest itself. In ordinary life it is kept down by buffers. Question. Could you explain a little more what you mean by buffers? Answer. Buffers are very difficult to describe or define. As I said, they are kind of partitions in us that keep us from observing ourselves. You may have different emotional attitudes. They always refer to emotional attitudes. Towards the same thing in the morning, at midday, and in the evening, without noticing it. Or in a certain set of circumstances you have one kind of opinion, and in another circumstance another kind of opinion, and buffers are walls that stand between them. Generally, each buffer is based on some kind of wrong assumption about oneself, one's capacities, one's powers, inclinations, knowledge, being, consciousness, and so on. They differ from ordinary wrong ideas because they are permanent. In given circumstances, one always feels and sees the same thing, and you must understand that in man 1, 2, and 3, nothing must be permanent. The only chance he has of changing is that there is nothing permanent in him. Opinions, prejudices, preconceived ideas are not buffers yet, but when they become very firm and always the same, and always have the same trick of shutting things off from our sight, they become buffers. If people have some kind of constant wrong attitude, based on wrong information, wrong work of centres, negative emotion, if they always use the same kind of excuse, they prepare buffers. And when a buffer is established and becomes permanent, it stops all possible progress. If buffers continue to develop, they become fixed ideas, and that is already insanity, or the beginning of insanity. Buffers can be very different. For instance, I knew a man who had a very interesting buffer. Every time he did something wrong, he said that he did it on purpose, as an experiment. This is a very good example of a buffer. Another man had a buffer that he was never late. So with this buffer firmly established, he was always late but never noticed it. And if his attention was drawn to it, he was always astonished and said, "How can I be late? I am never late." Question. When a buffer has gone down and you see something that seems unbearable, what is the next step? Answer. All the work is preparation for that. If one does not work but only thinks that one works and a buffer suddenly disappears by some accident, one finds oneself in a very unpleasant situation, and one also sees that one only pretended to work. Buffers help us to pretend instead of really working. This is why people in the ordinary state cannot have conscience, because if conscience suddenly came, they would go mad. Buffers are useful in this respect. They help to keep us asleep. For if other sides are not developed, if everything is not brought into a certain balance, one would not be able to bear oneself as one is. So it is not even advisable to destroy buffers before one is ready. One must be ready first. We can bear ourselves only because we do not know ourselves. If we knew ourselves as we are, it would be unbearable. Question. Work seems to make one more unhappy. Answer. Study of the system, acquiring more control, cannot make one more unhappy. There is no abnegation in it. What one has to lose is imagination. Anything that is real is not an obstacle to awakening. It is the imaginary things that keep us asleep, and those we have to give up. Question. Are buffers due to education and surroundings? Answer. To many things, but the best methods are created by self-education. Question. Does the system teach us to get rid of buffers? Answer. Yes, the system teaches us first to find them. Then, having found them, you may find methods for getting rid of them. You cannot begin to work on them before you know them. Question. How can one find buffers? Answer. One cannot find them unless one observes oneself in the right way. You must look for contradictions. Question. Must you find your own buffers or must you be shown? Answer. In any case, you cannot be shown until you have done all you can for yourself. Otherwise people never believe it. They say, anything but that. Question. Is saying to oneself, I will do it tomorrow, a buffer? Answer. It is not a buffer, but a very good method of keeping the buffers going well. Question. Is to want and not to want at the same time a buffer? Answer. It is not a buffer. A buffer often takes the form of a strong conviction. For instance, one man I used to know was convinced that he loved all men. In reality, he loved no one, but on the strength of this buffer he was free to be as unpleasant as he liked. It is a very safe and reliable buffer. Question. Can one learn about buffers by observing others? Answer. Yes, because they may help you to see buffers in yourself. But as things are seldom repeated literally, one would always see them only in others and not in oneself. But if one is prepared for it by finding these things in oneself first, by realizing one's mechanicalness, one could begin to see buffers.